Welcome to Prana Fictitious Stories. Before we begin today's story, we would like to make a small request. Please subscribe to our new channel and support us. Your support will inspire us to bring even more original and unique stories. So, without further delay, let's start today's story. I have been hiding my emotions for so many days. The truth, I loved him. And now I couldn't just be his friend anymore. A deep sigh escaped my lips as I stood there, watching him, pretending that I didn't care. But the reality, it was far from that. He had no idea what I truly felt for him. Arav, if only you knew. If only you could see what's been inside my heart since high school. What if I told you? What if I change anything? Or would it ruin everything? Stupid. This is all so stupid. My thoughts were a mess, raging, colliding, and then there was Raghav, a storm of a man. His presence, it felt like an old wound torn open, making my pain bleed all over again, because now I could see it clearly. Raghav's eyes on Arav. That possessiveness, that intensity, it shook me to my core. His gaze, it wasn't just casual, it was sharp, territorial, as if he saw something I didn't. And yet Arav, who never understood my feelings for him, how could he possibly understand Raghav's intentions? And then there was Karan, my best friend, always there, always supporting me. But today, why did he seem so different? I noticed it, the slight tremble in his fingers under the table, a tension in his shoulders. He was always composed, always in control. But now, what was this? What was he hiding? I wanted to ask, but my throat went dry. The evening dragged on, the air around us getting heavier. The tension was thick. Raghav, who had been silent for most of the night, suddenly leaned in, closer to me. His voice was low, but his words carried weight. Arav, have you ever thought about what you're really looking for? Or are you just letting things happen? The question, it hit me straight in the chest. His face was unreadable, his tone steady, but there was something different about him tonight. I hesitated. I don't know. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like I was admitting something I shouldn't. Karan shifted beside me, his eyes fixed on mine, deep, intense, almost desperate. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Stop it. Stop coming in front of me again and again like this. I screamed inside. Every time you're near, I find myself falling even deeper. Please, don't make this harder for me. I had tried to distance myself. I had told myself I needed time. But standing here, surrounded by the two of them, it felt like an illusion. The cafe was nearly empty now, the clinking of cups, the occasional hum of the staff cleaning up. It was the only sound that remained. I turned toward the window, watching the dimly lit streets outside, and then I heard footsteps. Karan. I knew it was him before I even turned. His presence, it was familiar, but tonight, it felt heavier. Karan, what's happening to you? My voice was barely above a whisper. His lips parted as if he was about to say something, but then he stopped. His throat moved as he swallowed back the words. Nothing, he finally said, his voice calm, too calm. Liar. I knew him too well. Karan, you're hiding something. What is it? Silence, and then a sigh. He hesitated, fingers curling into fists. Forget it, Arav? It's nothing important. But it was. I knew it was, and just as I was about to push him, just as I was about to demand the truth, the cafe door swung open. The sound echoed, snapping the tension like a thread. Raghav, he stepped inside, his presence swallowing the room, his dark eyes locked onto mine. I thought I should give you two a moment, he said, his voice smooth, controlled. But I think it's time we stop pretending. Karan stiffened beside me. My heart pounded. Pretending? What are you talking about? Raghav didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step closer. His gaze flickered between me and Karan, and then he smirked. Competition. That's what this is, isn't it? Karan froze. His jaw clenched so tight I thought he might shatter. His fists white-knuckled. Competition? Karan's voice was dangerously low now. Seriously, Raghav? Raghav only chuckled, but his eyes, they softened. For just a second. Some things, he said, tilting his head slightly, are worth fighting for. I exhaled, rubbing my forehead. You two sound like the lead actors in a drama series. Can we just be normal for once? Karan forced a smile. You're right, Arav. Raghav's drama should end here. But Raghav, he only smirked wider. He wasn't going to push Karan's buttons tonight. No, not yet. But the way he looked at me, the way his eyes burned into mine, it told me one thing. This wasn't over. And Karan? He stood frozen in place, watching as I walked away with Raghav. The air outside was cool, salty. The waves crashed gently against the shore. We had ended up in a secluded beach cafe, the fairy lights above us swaying with the breeze. Arav took a slow sip of his coffee. Across from him, Raghav, his intense gaze never wavered. And for the first time, Raghav wasn't hiding. There was something raw in his expression, a silent confession in his eyes. And Arav, he had no idea that tonight everything was about to change. You know, sometimes peace overstays its welcome. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of salt and coffee. Arav leaned back in his chair, watching the waves crash against the shore through the cafe's open window. He exhaled slowly, trying to ease the tension coiled inside him, but then he felt it. A presence, a shadow stretching across the floor before him. Didn't think you'd come here, Raghav. His voice was casual, but the weight of those words, it was impossible to ignore. Raghav smirked, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yeah, well, no one really likes places like this, Arav scoffed, and yet here you are. A chuckle, low, amused. Even I take a break from chaos sometimes. For a brief second, the tension cracked, replaced by something softer. But before either of them could settle into that unfamiliar calm, ding dong! Arav turned toward the sound instinctively. His fingers tensed on the table. The door swung open. Karan. He walked in like he owned the place, like the walls had been built for him to lean against. His gaze flickered, first to Arav, then to Raghav. His lips twitched into a smirk. Raghav sat up straighter. The air shifted. His jaw clenched. This was not a coincidence. Karan pulled out a chair, his movements slow, deliberate. Mind if I join? Raghav's eyes darkened. We were discussing something. His voice was firm, but Karan, he didn't even flinch. Arav sighed. It's fine, Raghav. He can sit. And just like that, Karan settled in, draping an arm over the back of his chair. The tension grew thicker. So, Karan said, tilting his head, how's work, Arav? Raghav's glare could have burned through steel. Arav hesitated, just for a second, but that second was enough. Karan noticed. You always manage, he said smoothly, his voice gentle yet laced with something deeper, something unreadable. Raghav's fingers curled into a fist. His patience? Gone. Why are you here, Karan? His words sliced through the air. Karan leaned back, relaxed. Maybe I remembered an old friend. But his eyes, they were fixed on Arav. Arav swallowed, forcing a smile. But it was too late. Unspoken things had already filled the room. For Karan, this was a chance to remind Arav of their past. For Raghav, this was a battle. The cafe felt smaller. The ocean breeze swirled around them, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with the wind. And Arav, he was caught between two storms that refused to end. The shoreline stretched endlessly, waves whispering secrets only the night could understand. Arav walked along the water's edge, his mind tangled in knots, Raghav's sharp gaze, Karan's quiet intensity, the way the air changed when the two of them were in the same room. Lost in thought, Arav stiffened. That voice, low, soothing. He turned. Karan stood there, hands in his pockets, moonlight painting him in shades of silver and shadow. His expression was softer than usual. Karan, what are you doing here? You left in a hurry. I was worried. Arav sighed, rubbing his temple. I just needed space. Karan stepped forward. You always do that. When things get out of control, you run. Arav folded his arms, defensive. And maybe I should. Silence. Then, you can't outrun everything, Karan murmured. Some things, they just are. Before Arav could respond, another voice. And some things take time to answer. A different kind of tension crackled through the air. Raghav, his eyes, locked on Karan, his presence unshakable. Karan turned slowly. Do you always sneak up on people? His tone was laced with sarcasm, but beneath it, the old rivalry lurked, waiting to strike. Arav exhaled sharply. Again? Neither of them answered. Raghav's jaw tightened. Arav, sometimes what a person wants to hide becomes too obvious. Arav's breath hitched. Before he could ask, stop messing with his head, Karan snapped, stepping closer. Raghav didn't back down. And you can stop deciding for him. That was it. Enough. Arav's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He took a step back, away from both of them. I don't know why you two keep fighting, but I don't want to be a part of it. His voice was sharp, edged with exhaustion. I don't want this drama. And with that, he walked away, leaving them standing there, silent. The waves crashed, filling the empty space between them. Karen was the first to speak. Why don't you just let him be happy? Raghav smirked, but there was no humor in it. And you think he'd be happier with you? Neither of them had an answer to that. But they both knew this wasn't just about business anymore. This was a war. And Arav? Arav was the one thing neither of them were willing to lose. The city lights flickered against the darkened sky. Arav's footsteps echoed through the quiet streets, his mind a chaotic mess. He needed space. He needed air. But even standing in front of his apartment, he wasn't sure if he'd left the storm behind. Keys clattered onto the table, jacket discarded. He collapsed onto the couch, rubbing his temples. His thoughts? Karen's soft words. Raghav's intense gaze, the way both of them felt so different yet left the same weight on his heart. His phone buzzed. A message. Arav, can we talk? Please. It's important. Arav stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button. Before he could type, another message. I know tonight was tough, but I need to tell you something. Stop running away, Arav. His pulse spiked. Both messages demanded answers, but Arav, he wasn't ready to give them. He set the phone down, stepping toward the window. The city lights flickered, the shadows stretching across his apartment walls. Somewhere out there, Karan and Raghav were probably staring at their own walls, fighting their own battles. And Arav was just starting to realize this wasn't just rivalry. This wasn't just business. And the answers he was afraid to face, they were waiting for him in the shadows, waiting for the moment he was ready to see the truth.